lost my 23-year relationship in a second. He overheard his boss bragging about last night W/me. The man I had an affair with boldly bragged about our relationship on the phone, and my husband found out about it. Right now, I have lost my husband due to his foolishness. I wish I never went on that path because it has cost me a great loss. The friendship I built almost all my life is gone. My name is Eva, and I am 38 years old. I am a chef, and I own a small eatery. The name of my husband is David. David and I had been married for 8 years now, but we had known each other for over 23 years now. David is 40 years old. My husband works in estate management. The first time we met was when we were in high school. It was very much a love-hate meeting at first. I didn't like David because he was always surrounded with people. The most popular girls in school were always around him. So I never really liked that. I never really had an encounter with him in school up till one day I saw him crying after school. I didn't know what was wrong with him, and I wanted to make sure that he was okay. David opened up to me and told me that he had problems at home with his family. I felt for him because the divorce that his parents were having was taking a toll on him. I didn't know what that felt like because I had a happy home with my mother and father, so in love. That day I stayed with David and made sure he was okay before going home. From there, we became friends. He could see me in school and we could talk and have lunch together. The people in school became surprised about our sudden friendship, but I never cared to explain it to them, and neither did he. I could always invite him to my house to eat, and he liked it. I introduced him to my family and everybody loved him. Our friendship continued to grow even after school. David was the type of guy that had everyone around him because he was good looking. He had girlfriends throughout the time we were together and I never liked them. A few months after high school, we went to the same community college, and it was then I started developing feelings for my best friend. People who saw us together could mistake us being in a relationship, but he had always brushed it off. So I kept my feelings to myself because I didn't want to lose my friendship over it. Going forward, I became jealous of the attention he gave his girlfriends. It was getting too much for me. Anytime I was trying to take my mind off him by dating other people, he could scare the guys away. We graduated from school and everyone went their own way. We never lost contact because we could see each other back home whenever he came home for the holidays. David became a good businessman and I was happy for him. A few years back, we met in our hometown for Christmas holidays when our relationship grew beyond friendship. David and I were drunk, and one thing led to another, and we slept together. In the morning, I was feeling ashamed of myself because I had thought I had let myself and him down, but David had explained to me that he had feelings for me since high school, and he thought I didn't like him that way. I told him I had liked him even before we became friends. I just didn't know how to go about it because I was the type of girl he liked. We dated for a year and we got married. Our friends and family kept saying they knew we were going to end up together because of how close we were. It was a beautiful day for us. My mom, Beth, was always in support of everything I did, and he was happy I was getting married to the love of my life. She knew right from the beginning because I always told her everything. So she wasn't surprised when we started dating. After the wedding, we moved into our new house and we started our lives. 2 years into our marriage, David got a job back in our hometown and we had to move. It was his dream to take over the estate management of our hometown, and when he was offered the job, we didn't think twice. I loved our hometown, and the job came at a time when I wanted to have my own restaurant, and it was also so good because we were going to be close to our family. We moved and we settled in quickly. I started looking for a place to set up my restaurant, and my mom helped me in finding a spot close to town. David had resumed his position and he was settling him fine. Things were moving smoothly. David and I continued to go on dates when we had time, and at the end of the date, we could always come back home and sleep in each other's arms as our dreams came through. My mother could invite us to the house for dinner, and we could talk about how we were neglecting or denying our feelings back then. It was always funny. David's parents separated a long time back, and ever since he hadn't seen his mother. His father was around for a while, but he disappeared a few years back, and ever since he had been part of my family, and my parents treated him as if he was their own son. It wasn't long I was able to set up my restaurant in town, and because I was a known chef, people were ready to start trying out my dishes. I opened the restaurant with a lot of local people there, and my business kicked off. Business was moving fine. My husband and I could eat at my restaurant and spend time together before we got back to work. David was also bringing in his clients to my restaurant to have meetings during the day, and also his colleagues usually come around for lunch and dinner. They usually praise me for being such a good chef. The friends I had when we were in school, we reconnected and we started moving together again. Most of us are married now, and we usually meet together to gossip and talk about the latest things happening in town. We went on spa dates, we went on trips together. They had always talked about how shocked they were that I married my best friend, and also because they never saw it coming. But only one of them knew my real feelings, and that was Ruth, my best friend. She was there for me anytime I could cry seeing David with other girls, and so because of that, we understood each other so well. It was really good to be back home after a while. It was a bright morning after we had rain throughout the night, and David and I were getting ready to start the day. David decided that we should get breakfast at the restaurant together. I quickly got ready and we were on our way there. I started to think about how we had settled in already and how it was time for us to have children. I knew that topic was very sensitive for David. Because of how he grew up with love from his parents, he believed he was not going to be a good father to our kids. I didn't want to press him further ever since we had that discussion because I knew it could push him away. All of my friends had children by then, and they were happy. I didn't know what to do about it, and it was eating me up slowly. During the car ride, David had noticed that my mood had changed, and he asked me what was wrong. I wanted to tell him, but I knew it could cause a lot of problems. I concluded in my mind saying I needed to speak to someone who could understand me, and I made plans to invite Ruth over to the restaurant. David and I got to the restaurant, and it was still early for the locals here. Some of my staff were already on duty, but I needed to make the food myself. I made breakfast for us, and we ate while discussing our plans for the day. David had told me that he was going to the city to sort some paperwork for the town, and that he was going to be gone for 2 days. I was already missing him at that point, but he assured me he was going to be back in time. David left for work and told me to take good care of myself. I bid him goodbye and continued with work. I looked at the time and saw that it was already very late in the afternoon, and I had not spoken with David yet. I called him and he told me he was just landing. We spoke for a while and I continued to work. I called Ruth a few hours later and she came over after work. Ruth was a lawyer. She was just always passionate about the law. It was her thing. In college, she was like the mother of the group. She had said we are either partying too much or drinking too much. She was the one that was always cool and collected. I made a late lunch for her. She always liked my cooking back then. I spoke to her over what I was going through concerning David, and she advised me to just give it time, but we had been married for a while now. I was tired of giving him time. She explained to me that if I made the decision of speaking to him and not been cautious about it, I might end up pushing him away. I understood her, and I decided to follow her advice because I knew whenever David was pushed too far, he could shut down and not talk for weeks. The last one that had happened with his parents, he went on without talking for a year. Ruth advised me to take everything easy, that I was somewhat dealing with a child. She then proceeded to cheer me up by telling me about her husband's birthday party that was coming up in a few days. I was very happy for her, and she told me I was in charge of taking care of food for the event. We talked about the guest list for some time, and she left. I began to prepare for the event already because it wasn't very far again. I had met Bill, Ruth's husband, a few years back, and he is such a sweet person, so I was happy I was doing this for them. I finished up and I had to leave because I was very tired, but I asked my staff to close up the restaurant. I got home freshened up and my husband called me. We spoke for some time and he told me his work had been extended. I was not happy about that because I wanted to attend the party with him. I told him about the party and he said I should send his regards. He won't be able to make it. A few days later, I made everything that Ruth had ordered for her husband's party, and I was at the event very early to set everything up. I went there with some of my staff and we were ready for the evening. I quickly went home to go and change for the party. It got ready and I was on my way back to the party. Before I got there, the party was in full swing. I joined them. I looked for Ruth and Bill and I saw them together. I wished Bill a happy birthday and he thanked me for finding time for Carter for the event. I was speaking with Ruth and her husband when I saw someone I thought I was never going to see again. I saw Maxwell, my first boyfriend in high school. I was shocked, and when he came over to greet Bill, I was speechless. I looked at Ruth and she had this apologetic eyes. Maxwell was my first in everything. He tried his much possible best for me to get over David, but it never worked. I used him to make David jealous back then, and it didn't work because David never looked my way. When I finally broke it up with him, he was very devastated. He blamed me for using him and for throwing his love away. He had blamed David back then after the breakup, but I don't think David knew anything about Maxwell. Since then, I haven't seen him, and I kind of still blamed myself for everything that happened, and I never got the chance to apologize to him. After he finished talking to Bill and Ruth, he turned to me and refused to acknowledge me. I excused myself and I went to the restroom. I felt like everything from last time was coming to crash down on me. I went back to the party and I tried to speak with him, but he ignored me. I just wanted to apologize for what I did back then. I was about to leave the party when I saw Ruth running up to me. She explained that she didn't know Maxwell was going to be around, that he just got a new job in town and that was all she knew. I told her to forget about it and not to bother because I already saw she was already worked up. I told her to enjoy the party and we could see later in the week. I got home and I went straight to bed. I left the party because I knew my staff would take care of things. David called me and we talked on the phone. I didn't tell him about Maxwell because I knew there wasn't anything to tell. He told me he was coming back the following day and I looked forward to seeing him. I slept off thinking and praying that David and Maxwell's path do not cross in this small town. Because I do not want any trouble, but I had it in mind that I needed to apologize to him as soon as possible. It's been a few days and David had returned. He went to the office and he was informed that his boss was transferred to another state and she had been replaced by another person. David told me he hadn't seen his new boss and he was hoping the new boss should be someone that saw how much passion he had for his community. David and I got ready and he drove me to the restaurant. He quickly left, saying today was the day his new boss was resuming and he needed to be there on time. We said our goodbyes and he left. I got to work and we began serving our customers. The local people in my community are very lovely. They often have nice reviews about my food and some of them bring fresh veggies for me once in a while. This was what I loved about this town. I was arranging orders in the kitchen when one of my waitresses came and said that a customer wanted to thank me in person. I initially thought it was one of my very good customers, but when I got outside, it was no other person than Maxwell. He told me he had not really enjoyed the meal, and he had a bad experience eating at my place. At that time, I knew he was trying to get to me, and I didn't give him the satisfaction. I told him we were sorry and we could improve on our services. He left the restaurant, and I felt a sigh of relief because he had become more intimidating. I got back to work and I started thinking, is this how things are going to be now? With Maxwell making life uncomfortable for me, he didn't even give me any chance to explain things to him. He was just cold. I finished my work for the day and I went to see my parents. I got home and I saw that my dad had gone on a business trip. My mom and I chatted for a while and she told me about how she had saw Maxwell in town. I explained everything to her and she said I should apologize to him and move on, and I shouldn't hang it over my head forever. She also advised I tell David everything that happened, and I made plans to tell him everything that evening. I said my goodbyes to my mom and I went home to make dinner for David. I finished up dinner and he came in from work. He freshened up and I asked him about his new boss because he was awfully quiet about it. He told me his new boss was a man named Maxwell and he was making things difficult for him at the office. David felt like his boss didn't like him because of the way he had treated him. I was very devastated when I found out that his boss was Maxwell of all people. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't tell him then that I had a history with his boss that could complicate things the most. I knew David was very troubled because he wanted to make the first impression with his boss, and he didn't know what he had done for him to have treated him harshly. I decided I could go and see Maxwell and give him a piece of my mind because he was just being childish over nothing. The next day, I met up with Ruth and I told her what was going on. I was very angry and I told her I was going to confront Maxwell about it. She told me it wasn't a good idea, but I knew I wanted to do it because he was punishing my husband for something he didn't do. Since I was trying to reach him and it was difficult, I decided that Ruth should be the one to set us up so that I could talk to him. Ruth was feeling reluctant at first, but I convinced her it was for my peace and I needed to apologize to him so he could leave my husband alone. She called him and he agreed to meet up with Ruth. So I went to the restaurant in the middle of the town. I waited for a few minutes before he came. He tried to leave, but I was able to convince him to listen to me. I apologized severally and he told me I was a bad person for using him the way I did. He told me what I did had messed with his head for a long time. I told him he should tell me how I could help him move forward. He said I should go on 3 dates with him. I told him if I did, was he going to leave my husband alone and give him the flowers he deserved in regards to their work, and he agreed. I left there feeling like I had won and everything was going to be all right, but I didn't know I was going ahead of myself and that Maxwell had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. I went home and I told Ruth that I was able to convince Maxwell to let everything go, and she said she wasn't sure it was going to be possible, that she didn't believe he had forgiven me without any catch. I told her the catch was that I was to go on 3 dates with him, and that didn't sit well with Ruth, and I got where she was coming from. I was a married woman who was about to go on a date with my ex that sounded very bad. I went on the date with Maxwell, and he kept making me feel bad about what I did. He kept bringing up the past, and each day I was feeling so guilty sleeping next to my husband, knowing fully well I had just had dinner with another man. I asked David about how things were in the office, and he said that his boss was beginning to warm up to him, and he was happy that at least my efforts were not a waste. I was finally on the last date with Maxwell, and I was happy at least I was going to have my life back now. But I didn't know that Maxwell was going to be sneaky. He told me that the last date was going to be at his house, and I was the one that was going to make the food. I got to his house very early in the evening in order for me to prepare for the dinner. I made food and we had dinner together. I was about to leave when Maxwell pleaded with me to have drinks with him for the very last time. I didn't know he was trying to get me drunk. After a few minutes, I didn't know what I was doing again, and I ended up in bed with Maxwell. In the morning, I woke up with the worst headache ever, and when I was aware of where I was, I found out I was in bed with Maxwell. Everything from the previous day came crashing down on me. I began to cry, and Maxwell tried to stop me from crying, but I did not hear any of it. He promised me he could not mention anything that happened to my husband if I didn't. I was grateful because I knew that could end my marriage. I went back home and I somehow found an excuse for my husband, and he believed me. I couldn't tell anyone what had happened because nobody could believe me. I didn't have feelings for him. David left for work, and I was relieved that Maxwell wasn't going to mention what had happened to my husband, but I was very wrong. David got back from work and he was looking defeated, and I knew I was finished. He told me I should explain to him why his boss was bragging about sleeping with me last night to his colleagues, and I fell down to my feet and started crying. I explained to him how it all started when we were in high school and how I used him to make you jealous, and also how he had appeared weeks ago and was making things difficult for you because of the things I did to him. But David was not understanding where I was coming from. He left the house angrily, and I haven't seen him in a while. My marriage was officially over. Update. Hi, everyone. I'm quite sad to say that my stupid mistake eventually led to the end of my marriage. I trusted my ex in keeping a secret, and my marriage ended. Now me and my husband have gotten a divorce due to the revenge my ex took on me because of what I did years back. I wish I never let my husband down, but I was only trying to protect our marriage, not knowing my ex was out to get me. Right now, it's just my family and my friends that are helping me pick up the pieces of my life. Regret is an understatement in my life right now.